It is a road show edition of the Matt Barrie Show presented by Allstate. It's today's Friday, I believe. Our clocks are all off. First of all, Happy New Year to everyone out there. We just finished the quarterfinals of the college football playoff, which is what we're going to react to today here on the Matt Barrie Show presented by Allstate. Got started with Penn State taking care of Boise State, a classic between Arizona State and Texas. What a game that was. The nightcap, Georgia and Notre Dame, and then Ohio State obliterating Oregon in the Rose Bowl is what we'll get into here. It is now time to check in with Paul Finebaum, presented by Allstate here on the Matt Barrie Show. Paul, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Matt. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so Paul is in his studios in Charlotte. I am down the street in Charlotte at the Marriott, getting ready to call the Duke's Mayo Bowl here on Friday the 3rd. And let's go. I want to do this most recent game and then go back, because I think Notre Dame, Georgia is the first talking point in this one. The game postponed a day because of the tragedy there on Bourbon Street. You were there. SEC Network was there. But at the end of the day, Paul, Notre Dame gets the win because, candidly, they were the better team.
There's no doubt they were the better team. And, you can point to a million different things, but I think it starts up front. I mean, the fact that Notre Dame was more physical than Georgia and literally beat them at the line of scrimmage, which set up so many amazing moments. And we've seen the video a million times about those 11 seconds and then the 54 seconds. But that's what surprises me the most: that Kirby Smart, knowing that his line is getting blown up, would put Gunner Stockton in that situation, as opposed to going to the half down by 3, take a deep breath. And instead, I think he flat out blew it. And I don't like saying that, because I'm one of the biggest Kirby Smart fans in the world, but Matt, it's the truth. And that's why we have this podcast.
Yeah, and when you look at that game, and when you look at Georgia in total, we went on this show for 15, 16 weeks talking about Georgia. Some days they look really, really good. Others, they look really, really bad, and they find a way to win. When you live that way, when that's how you live, a loss will find you. And it found them last night in New Orleans. There was a point, Notre Dame returns the opening kickoff of the second half. I mean, I don't know how you thought, but I just didn't think Georgia was going to get back in it. They just didn't have anything.
No, I mean they had a chance. It was faint, but the officiating helped them get back in it. But ultimately they didn't. And you think back, I mean, Georgia was nearly blown up by Alabama. They were down 28-0. Ole Miss just beat them to a pulp. And Georgia Tech took them to 8 overtimes. I mean, this should not have been a surprise. But Matt, I'm as guilty as a lot of other people. I just kept believing that somehow this team would find a way, even though deep down you had to wonder about it. But it was a bad ending, and I am well aware of what the national narrative is out there, and I know we'll talk about it. But that's fine. Hey, Georgia has been the bell cow of the SEC for a couple of years, and that's over.
Yeah,
at least for this season.
Yeah, well, you segued me into my next question, because there was a 2, 3, 4 year period where it was Georgia and everybody else.
Yeah.
And Stetson Bennett and Jake Fromm and some of these guys, they were going to the SEC championship. They were playing for national championships against Alabama. And they finally got theirs. Kirby finally got his, and then he got 2. It's been a while now, Paul. And this Georgia team, and you said it, and I think I was one of them as well. Like, I thought Notre Dame could win the game. But I said yesterday on SportsCenter, if it got to the fourth quarter, that's when you have to like Georgia because of their history. I think that benefit of the doubt of that Georgia period of dominance, I think that's gone.
Completely. I would agree. Somebody asked me earlier, hey, is this the end of Georgia? It's not the end of Georgia, but just like we said earlier this year, nobody's afraid of Alabama anymore. Nobody's afraid of Georgia anymore. And that's how quickly it goes. But, the portal does it to everyone. And but there are a lot of questions, and ultimately, I'm sure Lane Kiffin is probably wondering: is somebody going to give me an apology for saying that this championship, nobody really wants to go to the SEC championship game? Because frankly, that's where the rest of the season was lost. It was a Pyrrhic victory. I mean, they won that battle, but they lost the war because they lost Carson Beck, and he was not perfect. Matt,
no,
Carson Beck was far from a vintage quarterback this year. but I would have trusted him a whole lot more than Gunnar Stockton yesterday.
Yeah, and that's what it came down to. And look, Gunner's got all the bona fides, but like you said, I was stunned by the end of half scenario, as you brought up a minute ago. Kirby said after the game, I was going to stay aggressive no matter what. I get that, but at some point, you got to help get yourself to the second half. And in a game like that, Paul, I said it yesterday, and it's been talked about. I thought for the first time in this Notre Dame run of BCS games and playoff games, I thought that last night was the first time they belonged on the field with an SEC team, and it showed. Like this Notre Dame team isn't, oh, it's good enough for Notre Dame's schedule. They're good enough to win the national championship.
They are. And I find it so interesting too that a couple of years ago when Brian Kelly left, he he was leaving to win a national championship. He was going to LSU and he wanted to beat Nick Saban and do all the things that he essentially admitted he could not do at Notre Dame. And they gave the job to Marcus Freeman for one reason, because he could recruit.
Right.
And not only did he recruit high school, he's done a masterful job in the portal. And what Brian Kelly, he's hanging on right now at LSU, trying to scrape away another disappointing season.
You brought up the national narrative, so we may as well dip our toes into that water now before we get to some of the other games. I will segue to Texas, Arizona State, which was the classic of the college football playoff to this point. Arizona State, by all accounts and statistics, was the better team until the end. Texas almost got beat, if not for a targeting call and a 4th and 13 conversion. And now Texas is the lone representative from the SEC in the college football playoff. And Paul, they skated by Arizona State, and now they have Ohio State.
Yeah, no, I mean, as close as they came, can you imagine this conversation, Matt, today if Arizona State had pulled that off, which by all accounts they should have. People think that guys like us really, wrap ourselves into this, and we can't deal with the reality. The reality is that we may have an All Big Ten championship, and you talk about shattering the SEC myth. Try that on for size a week and a half from now in Atlanta. And by the way, I mean Texas could still win. And all the Schadenfreude will go out the window, but it doesn't feel like that right now with the way Ohio State's playing. And I think most what happens in the group think and the painting the broad brush is the critics out there they narrow 2 or 3 people in the media, and you went through it last year with Florida State, and this year I'm on that list. I mean, I'm not the most prominent because I don't fight back on social media like some of my esteemed colleagues do, because I respect the fact that anybody has something to say, I'll listen to it. That's what I do. That's my business. That's your business. But the SEC is in a tough spot right now, and it can get worse. But it's probably more likely to get worse than get better.
Yeah, because right now, I don't think there's anyone that will argue, and I've said this numerous times on this show and on every platform that I'm on, that when clicking, Ohio State's the best team in the country. Yeah. And there's the most maddening thing about Ohio State is they were never that best team in the country. And it's almost as if they needed the Michigan wake-up call to just get pissed off at the fact that they weren't playing well. And I don't care what anybody says, right here, January 3rd, as we sit here today, Ohio State's the best team in the country, and it's not even close.
No, and I had somebody ask me yesterday, well, I guess you'll pick Texas. And I said, I guess you're wrong, because I mean you can check your SEC ego at the door, but I don't understand how you could pick Texas right now, Matt. You're just simply fighting a headwind and saying, okay, that the team that, I mean, if they had lost to Oregon, that would not have surprised me as much,
right?
Because maybe they had that one blowout game, but now this isn't just an outlier. This is a trend that's hard to fight.
Yeah, this is a mission for a team that knows how talented they are, and they're finally putting all that talent, and it's manifesting itself on the field. And now Texas, who they got up to a 14-3 lead, then a 17-3 lead early, and you give credit to Arizona State for fighting back and making it a game, tying it and sending it overtime. But we've kind of seen this out of Texas as well. They've kind of had some of those games where they get out to a lead, and they were clearly the better team early in that first quarter, and then they let teams back in games without choking them out. And if you
Yeah.
try that against Ohio State, you're done.
Well, I mean, if you even get to that point, I mean, Ohio State's like Mike Tyson was at his peak. I mean, you couldn't even walk out to the middle of the ring before you were getting knocked out, and that's where they are. And Texas let Clemson back in the game in
Yeah.
the playoff.
Yeah.
They let others. They should have blown Georgia out in the SEC championship. They just simply couldn't score a touchdown. They had to settle for field goals, and it's hard to really believe in them. I mean, Quinn Ewers, for all the criticism, he has made some unbelievable plays this year. You saw it the other day, but he also leaves something to be desired. So yeah, I mean, I think Texas is formidable, but uh, that first quarter will be fascinating to watch. If Ohio State is struggling, then we will have a game. Otherwise, watch out.
Paul, 2 years in a row, we could have an all Big Ten national championship. I say that because Washington Pac-12
Right.
last year, now a member of the Big Ten in Michigan. That wouldn't be a good look for the conference that you cover. That throughout the year, throughout the year, they're talking about very boisterous about the schedule and the record and the every Saturday we do more, our schedules are tougher. And then for 2 years in a row, you may not have a team playing for a national championship.
No, I think you have to go back 20 years to go 2 straight years where an SEC team was not playing for the national championship. And I mean, I realize we went 2 years without the SEC winning it in 13 and 14, and that was shocking enough.
Yeah.
Matt, I I'm I'm just not sure how to respond to you there because uh, the one thing that the SEC does better than anyone else is boast. Even better than the winning streaks and the
Yeah.
championship, and the fact that so many people are enjoying this too is even more remarkable. I'm mildly bemused by the whole thing.
I've been critical of the Big Ten. I've said that that's a top heavy league and that everything past team four is not
Yeah,
good. But even I have to look at that and say, well, wait a second now. Penn State, was their road in the bracket favorable? Sure. They'll get to show it against Notre Dame. Ohio State looked like mediocre against Michigan. Now they're just beating the hell out of people. It's almost time for college football pundits, fans, and whoever to maybe the Big Ten is on to something because they've done it the last 2 years.
yeah. I mean, I think if you look at the SEC objectively, there isn't that just standalone perfect team. There's a lot of good teams, but
Yes.
but Matt, those good teams have had flunker days. So I mean, when you and that was really hard part. I mean, Ole Miss is the only one that even showed a pulse in the postseason, but they were playing an undermanned Duke, so I don't think you can read a whole lot into that. But I just think it's inherent with the SEC. And Matt, I know my position. I know what I've done. But you have to look at yourself in the mirror sometimes and say, you know what, this may not be a very good year. And I'll get pushback saying, well, you can't say that until Texas is out of it. Well, you can say that. Alabama was a huge disappointment. LSU was way off the charts. Georgia was below average for them. I mean, that's how good Georgia has been, is
Yeah.
that they seemed average and they made it to the quarterfinals of the college football playoff. But every single SEC team has flaws. And the idea that Ole Miss could lose to Kentucky, Alabama could lose three double digit favored games. It's hard to comprehend, and we have never seen it before. But you now know why a year ago next week Nick Saban bailed out,
Yeah.
because he not only had the best team, he had the best second team, and I mean it's been said many times, but it's worth repeating that. I mean, he had future number one draft choices on the reserve team. That's how. I mean, he was deep. He was so deep it was ridiculous. Nobody's that deep anymore.
No, and it's a good segue into the Alabama conversation because as we know on selection day, South Carolina, they wanted they lose to Illinois, and Illinois is now a 10-win team, Big Ten. Uh, Alabama, they were steadfast that they should have been in, and then they go and get beat by Michigan for a second year in a row. Some of the 6-6 teams that we were being told are better 6-6 teams than everybody else, they're losing in bowl games. And it's you have to, what have we said a lot? Like there's nothing better than people who are confident in their ability, but you got to back it up. In bowl season, I get it. There's opt-outs, just that and the other. But it has in Alabama, just how they've ended the last two seasons, especially in year one of Kalen DeBoer. What's in store for him now?
I believe very, very firmly that Kalen DeBoer is on a scorching hot seat. Now, you can say, what does that mean? I'll tell you what I think it means. It means that he is under a microscope. It was playoff or bust this year, and he went bust. And the only chance to scrape all that away was to win a bowl game against a lousy team, which Michigan was all but really one game this season, and he
Yeah.
couldn't do it. And the way they lost, it was just horrifying to watch. And so I mean the goodwill. The goodwill went out the window so quickly for him this year, and he's already making a few changes on his staff. The fans are calling our show. I mean they are just up in arms about the lack of offensive production. They're
Mm-hmm.
also glad Jalen Milroe's gone, but that's not really the question anymore. He wasn't coming back because he doesn't need to come back. But Kalen DeBoer needs to be very careful because if he doesn't make it to the playoffs next year, uh, the target on his back is going to be immense. And that is it's almost impossible to calculate where he will be because it depends on the flow of the schedule. But right now he is very unpopular. Um, and I'm talking about real fans. I'm not talking about the
Mm-hmm.
do-gooders
Right.
that masquerade. Uh, and I was in Alabama 2 weeks ago. Actually, it was last week for Christmas, and I had people stop me on the street saying, like, what's with this guy? I mean, they don't even mention his name. I mean, he's like, what's with this guy in Alabama? It's gotten to be that bad.
Yeah. And when he comes in after what he did with Michael Penix at Washington, and it almost seemed like Jalen Milroe regressed. He had the huge game against Georgia, and then you just never knew which one you were getting every week.
Well, because they really had no offensive philosophy. And I'm sure what Kalen DeBoer is good at did not equate with what Jalen Milroe was good at. But hey, you're the head coach. If you don't think he can be the quarterback, get rid of him. And the thing that bugs people about DeBoer is it's just his attitude. I mean, he talks, like a high school coach at a private academy. He doesn't resonate with the Alabama folks who you've been there many times, Matt. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they're hardcore. And they know football, and they're used to great football. I mean, they've had the two greatest football coaches in history on that campus.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, and now they go into a season. I just think it's unfathomable to think we expanded the playoff by 8 teams and Alabama wasn't one of them. And then they go and lose their bowl game to Michigan. So we've got the semifinals set: Penn State, Notre Dame, Texas, Ohio State. Who do you ultimately believe is going to be playing for the national championship January 20th in Atlanta?
Today, I would take Notre Dame and Ohio State because they've been the most impressive. And I mean, I just can't get excited about Penn State beating SMU at home and Boise State. And I was guilty too, Matt, of looking past Arizona State. I knew they were a hot team, but when Arizona State and Boise State are not the same teams.
No.
I mean, to me, the idea that Penn State could make it to the semifinals of this thing, really not having played anyone yet, is the main reason why I like Notre Dame. I'm still not a believer in Indiana, but they look very good in that victory, and they looked even better against what I believe is a quality team in Georgia.
Yeah. And,
And
and
on the other
again,
side,
yeah.
uh, yeah, to be repetitive here from the front of the conversation, uh, Ohio State doesn't have to play as well. They just have to play consistently and use the talent that they have. And I'm not really sure why it's taken that long for Ryan Day to figure out what he has, but good for him that he did.
Yeah, figured it out at the right time, and now Ohio State appears to be a gauntlet. I'm with you. I think at the end of the day, Ohio State, Notre Dame, just based on how they're playing, seems the most likely. The one thing I'd say for Texas, they get a home game in Arlington at the
Yeah.
Cotton Bowl. I mean, that's a good situation and scene for them. But I would say the four teams we have, not too surprised based on everything that was going into the storylines. But ultimately, I would right now. I think the college football playoff, the 12th team did what it was supposed to do. And I mean, look, Penn State ended the season ranked in the top five, and everyone's like, well, what the hell are you talking about? Well, here they are. I mean,
Yeah.
they're here. So I think it did its job. Do you?
I do. I mean, I don't. It's hard to tell because this week was so screwy, Matt,
Yeah.
to understand really how this playoff is resonating, how we're connecting. You know, because the New Orleans experience really cast a pall over everything. But it's been entertaining. It's a lot better than it was. It's certainly better than where we were 10 years ago. And I think we next week is really the great week. I mean, I know everybody. I mean, stop me if you've heard this 18 million times about the Saturday of the Final Four, but
Yeah.
Thursday and Friday are going to be dramatic.
It's amazing.
And there are four blue bloods. I mean, there's no outliers in this thing.
Right.
Every one of these programs has a long resume, and I mean, we haven't talked as much about Notre Dame and Penn State, but there's reams of tradition and bad blood over the many years between those two.
Yeah. And look, if Arizona State would have somehow gotten in, it'd have been a great story. But if you'd have looked at
Yeah,
the semifinals, you'd have been like, oh, okay, well. But I look at these semifinals, I'm like, yeah, those are four of the best teams in the country. I mean, those teams are all,
yeah.
and that's how I'm kind of looking at it.
In Texas, I mean, I realize Texas has not been great lately. Uh,
Yeah.
well, I mean, I realize they've been to the playoffs the last 2 years, but they had that long dry stretch. But Texas traditionally is still one of the big time programs in college football. And Ohio State, I mean, it's just and the fact that I think they're going to play first game of next year
Yeah.
is even more amazing.
Yeah. Look, it's been amazing at this point. The football, outside of the tragedy in New Orleans, just an odd scene and an eerie scene and a sad scene out there. But end of the day, playoffs got us these four teams. Cannot wait to watch next week and break it down with everybody. Once again, thanks for watching, listening. The Matt Barrie Show presented by Allstate. Two guys, one Charlotte, different rooms. That's how we roll here on the Matt Barrie Show presented by Allstate.